I came home a little later than usual that Thursday evening. Not crazy late. Just enough that the sun had dipped below the line of the neighbor's roof and the porch light kicked on before I even reached the front steps. My back hurt from being on my feet too long, and I still had the smell of shop oil clinging to my flannel. Typical end to a long workday, or so I thought. The house was quiet when I stepped inside, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. No sound of the TV. No music playing in the background. No faint hum of the laundry machine or pots rattling in the kitchen. Just the low, steady hiss of water running somewhere upstairs. I kicked off my boots and headed into the living room. That's when I noticed it. Something that stopped me cold. Draped casually across the back of our couch was a leather jacket. Women's, dark brown, high quality. Not something I'd seen before, and not the kind of thing Alyssa ever wore. Her style leaned more towards soft knits, long cardigans, hoodies with worn sleeves. This jacket was sleek, sharp, confident. Out of instinct, I picked it up. That's when the smell hit me. Perfume. Not Alyssa's. This was something else entirely, floral but not light. Almost spicy, like jasmine with a bite. Bold and deliberate. It clung to the jacket like it had been worn more than once. I held it up to my nose without even thinking. Something about it felt wrong, like it didn't belong in our house, like it had walked in from someone else's world. I turned slowly and noticed a half-finished glass of wine on the side table. White wine. That alone might not have meant anything, except Alyssa doesn't drink white. She never has. She always says it tastes thin and grassy, which I've never really understood, but it's stuck. Red is her thing. Always has been. The water was still running upstairs. I stood there for a good 30 seconds, holding that jacket, staring at the wine glass, trying to make sense of it all in that slow, dawning way where your brain starts offering up explanations you don't quite believe but need to consider anyway. Maybe a friend stopped by. Maybe Alyssa poured a glass of white for them. Maybe she didn't mention it because it wasn't important. Maybe. But there were too many maybes. And none of them settled the weight in my gut. I placed the jacket back on the couch and walked toward the stairs, not quite ready to go up. I didn't want to catch her off guard. Or maybe I didn't want to catch myself off guard. Either way, I waited, watched the stairs, listened to the sound of the water hitting tile, the occasional soft splash like someone rinsing shampoo from their hair. Except, it had been running for a long time. Longer than her usual showers. I glanced around the room again, trying to find more context. A phone? A bag? Maybe a note? But there was nothing. Just the faint scent of that perfume still hanging in the air like it had claimed space. When she finally came down, wrapped in a robe, towel twisted in her hair, she froze, just for half a second. You wouldn't have caught it if you weren't looking. But I was. Her eyes darted quickly to the couch, then to the wine glass, then back to me, and for the briefest moment, there was something on her face. A flicker of tension, like someone who walked into a room and realized they left something important out in the open. She masked it fast, though. Too fast. "Hey," she said, her voice light. "Didn't hear you come in." "Yeah," I replied, still standing by the couch. "Ran a little late. Long day." She nodded like that explained everything. Her tone was casual, maybe too casual. The robe, the hair still damp, the smile she gave me. It all seemed placed, like props on a stage. I gestured toward the jacket. "Did you get something new?" She blinked. "Huh? Oh, that." She gave a soft, rehearsed laugh. "That's Olivia's. She stopped by for a bit to talk. Just girl stuff, nothing major." Olivia. I tried to picture her wearing something like that. It didn't quite fit. Olivia was more yoga pants and oversized sweaters. I mean, yeah, maybe she owned something nice like this, but if she did, why leave it behind? "Didn't know she drank white," I said, nodding at the glass. Alyssa followed my gaze, and her lips curved just slightly. "She doesn't usually, but I had some in the fridge from the last time my mom was over. Figured I'd offer it." She moved toward the kitchen, opening a drawer as if she needed something. A spoon, a napkin, a reason to look away. It was smooth, practiced. That was what got me. Not the jacket. Not the wine. Not even the way the house smelled like unfamiliar perfume. It was the smoothness, the calmness, like she had the answer ready before I ever asked the question. That's what made my stomach twist. She came back into the living room, sat on the armrest of the couch like everything was normal, and tilted her head slightly. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." "Rough day at the shop?" "Something like that." She smiled softly and nodded, then reached for the wineglass. "You mind if I finish this?" I shook my head. She sipped it and winced slightly. "Still don't like white," she muttered, almost to herself. I watched her carefully. Her robe was tied just a little too perfectly. Her tone was just a little too casual. And that smile? It didn't quite reach her eyes. I'd known Alyssa long enough to tell when something was off. And tonight, everything was off. I didn't push it, though. I didn't ask the obvious questions. Who really owns the jacket? Who drank that wine? Why did the water run for so long before she even came downstairs? Instead, I just sat on the edge of the recliner and watched her sip the wine she didn't like while pretending everything was fine. But something in me shifted. It wasn't rage, not yet. It wasn't even full-blown suspicion. It was something colder, heavier, a slow, quiet cracking inside me. The kind that starts deep and silent and spreads like ice across a windshield. You don't always see it right away, but once it's there, you can't unsee it. I told myself I was overthinking it, that maybe Olivia really had stopped by. Maybe the jacket did belong to her. Maybe the water just ran longer than usual because Alyssa had a lot on her mind. Maybe. But here's the thing. I'd never had that many doubts all at once. Not in 10 years of knowing her. I couldn't put my finger on it, not exactly. But something about that night felt too perfect. Too controlled. The details were too neat, too convenient. That's when I realized something was wrong. Not in a dramatic soap opera kind of way, but in the real, quiet way people lie. And I just knew, this wasn't the first time something didn't add up. It was just the first time I noticed. After that night, something inside me wouldn't settle. Even though she smiled the same, touched my arm the same way, even kissed me on the cheek like she always did before heading off to bed, I felt it. This quiet fracture spreading beneath everything. And once a crack like that forms, it doesn't close back up. It deepens. Slowly. Quietly. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid on my side, staring at the wall, thinking about the jacket, the wine, the steam still clinging to the bathroom mirror when I went in after her. Alyssa had looked me in the eyes and lied. I knew it. But the thing that rattled me more than the lie itself was how easily it came to her. Like muscle memory. The next morning, she was already up and out by the time I came downstairs. A text blinked on my phone. "Early meeting? Grabbed coffee on the way. Hope you slept okay, Redheart." No mention of the jacket. No follow-up about Olivia. Just clean, confident normalcy. Too clean. That was the moment I knew something had shifted. It wasn't just paranoia. I wasn't inventing things. It was like someone had finally lifted the rug under which all the little inconsistencies had been swept over the past year. Things I had noticed but didn't question. Or maybe didn't want to. Like how, a few months back, she had suddenly changed the password on her personal email. When I asked about it, she said it was due to a new two-factor authentication policy at work. Sounded reasonable, but it had never been an issue before. I let it go. Or the time she mentioned a last-minute work trip. 2 nights in Chicago for a vendor engagement. She left in a hurry, packed light, and returned with barely a souvenir. No photos, no receipts, just a vague. It was all meetings, honestly. I remember asking if it went well, and she said yes, but there was something clipped in her tone. Something tight. At the time, I told myself I was being weird. But now I couldn't unhear that tension. And then there was her phone. She used to leave it lying around all the time. In the kitchen, on the coffee table, sometimes on the nightstand while she showered. No big deal. But lately, it was glued to her. Always face down. Always locked. She'd swipe away notifications before I could even glance in that direction. If I walked into a room, she'd sometimes step out to finish a call, There was a pattern, and I started seeing it everywhere. One afternoon, I came home early from work, hoping to surprise her. Just one of those random impulses. We used to do that for each other. Little gestures. I brought her favorite caramel latte from the place across town, the one with the handwritten quotes on the cup sleeves. I figured I'd drop it off at her office. She wasn't there. Her coworker, Jenna, looked up from her desk and smiled. "Hey." She stepped out for lunch. "Alone?" Jenna hesitated, then nodded too quickly. "Yeah, I think so." She mentioned needing a walk. I nodded slowly. "Cool. Thanks." As I turned to leave, I caught her watching me, her smile faltering just a bit. I got in my truck and sat there for 10 full minutes, latte cooling in the cup holder. She didn't answer my text. 40 minutes later, she finally replied, "Sorry, just got back. Was on a call and didn't see this. Rain check?" I didn't reply. I started checking the bank statements more often. Not obsessively, just enough to start connecting dots. There were charges at places she never mentioned. Wine bars downtown, a boutique hotel lobby cafe, and oddly timed Uber rides that didn't match her work hours. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to make my stomach tighten every time a charge came through. And then there was the note. It had been stuck to the fridge weeks earlier. One of those square sticky notes she used when she was trying to remember errands or appointments. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I remember reading it and chuckling, 2 o'clock, lake parking lot. Don't forget the cap. I assumed it was about a client meeting or maybe something random like a pickup for a donation drop-off. The cap made me think of bottled water or her yoga gear. I never asked. Why would I? But now, that note burned in my mind like a flare. The lake parking lot. We used to go there years ago. Before work took over and our weekends became home projects and grocery lists, it was one of our spots. Quiet. Hidden. Alyssa always liked how the trees closed in just enough to feel private. Like our own little world. We hadn't been there in over a year. So what was she doing meeting someone at 2 p.m. on a weekday? And why leave a reminder on the fridge if it was something innocent? I went to that parking lot the next day. Sat there in my truck for half an hour just watching. It was empty except for a jogger and an older man walking his dog. But that wasn't the point. I needed to see the place again, to feel what it stirred in me. It was a reminder of a version of us that had slowly eroded. That night I brought up the note. She was in the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel, when I casually asked, "Hey, what was that sticky note on the fridge a while back? The one that said lake parking lot?" She didn't turn to face me, just froze for a split second. Then she said, "What note?" I walked to the drawer where we kept spare pads, receipts, takeout menus, opened it, and after a little digging, found it tucked under a pamphlet. "This one." She turned, looked at it, and laughed, nervously. "Oh, that was for Olivia, actually. She borrowed my car and was meeting her cousin out there. I didn't want her to forget the cap for the yoga mat. Random, I know." I nodded, folding the note. Got it. I didn't believe her. Not for a second. It wasn't even that the story didn't make sense. It was that she had one ready, polished, just like the jacket, just like the wine, just like every excuse in the last 6 weeks. I started keeping notes of my own. A little notepad I tucked into my toolbox in the garage. Every odd phone call, every late night, every unexplained charge. Not because I wanted to catch her, I think deep down I already had, but because I needed to see it laid out in front of me. To stop gaslighting myself into thinking it was all in my head. One morning, she left her laptop open on the dining table. I glanced at it while grabbing coffee. Just a calendar app open. At least that's what it looked like. But something caught my eye. An entry marked as personal with no details. Blocked off for 3 hours mid-afternoon. Recurring. Every Thursday. I checked the time. That was her usual strategy planning session at the office. She had mentioned it before, with the same offhand shrug each time. Boring stuff, you'd hate it. But now I was sure. She had created an alibi. And that's when the doubt hardened into something sharper. Certainty. She was seeing someone. I didn't know who yet, or for how long. but every part of my body understood it before my mind was willing to say it out loud. She was cheating. And the worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was realizing just how far back the lies went. How many small, quiet choices she made to protect someone else while erasing me from the picture. That night, she came home smiling like nothing had changed, like we were still who we used to be. But I looked at her differently. And for the first time since it all began, I didn't try to pretend anymore. They say when your gut won't let something go, it's because your heart already knows the truth, even if your mind keeps making excuses. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. I wanted to believe she was just distracted, tired from work, distant because life got hard, not because she was drifting into someone else's arms. But wanting something to be true doesn't make it real. And after a while, pretending started to feel more exhausting than confronting it. I hired the private investigator on a Monday. His name was Dean, mid-50s, ex-cop. Looked like he'd seen a few too many marriages fall apart to be shocked by anything anymore. I found him online after scrolling past dozens of options that looked more like TV drama than real-world help. Dean didn't talk much, didn't ask a lot of questions. He just nodded while I explained the situation, scribbled a few notes, and said, "Give me a week." It didn't take that long. By Thursday, he called and asked if we could meet. His tone was different, professional, yes, but there was something in the pause before he spoke, a kind of warning. I told him to meet me at the auto shop after hours. I didn't want to risk Alyssa spotting him or overhearing anything. Too soon, too raw. He showed up in a beat-up Jeep, handed me a manila envelope like it was nothing, then leaned against the hood of his truck while I sat down on the steps and opened it. There were photos. Dozens. Her smile was unmistakable. Alyssa, standing outside a small cabin near the lake. Same lake as the note. Same parking lot. Same place I had sat weeks earlier, pretending I didn't know what it really was. She wasn't alone. A man, late 30s, maybe 40. Tall, a little scruffy, with that casual kind of confidence that doesn't need much to stand out. I recognized him immediately. His name was Chad. She had mentioned him once, just once, in passing. A guy from the partner firm we're doing logistics with, she'd said, like it didn't matter. Said he was kind of intense but sharp. Back then, I didn't think anything of it. Now I was looking at pictures of them together, laughing, sharing food from a paper container, standing too close. One photo showed her brushing something off his collar. Another had his hand resting on the small of her back. And then there were the ones that stopped everything inside me. Them kissing. Her hand on his cheek, eyes closed, like she was somewhere she belonged. And then her wearing that jacket, the same one I found on the couch that night. That scent I couldn't forget. Dean cleared his throat but didn't say anything. Just gave me time. There were time-stamped notes stapled to the back. She met him on a Tuesday, stayed until late Wednesday morning. The dates matched. It was the same week she said she was working from home due to a company policy change. I remembered coming home that night to the empty wine glass, the shower running, the lie about Olivia. They'd been at that cabin the whole time. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even move at first. I just sat there, staring at those glossy images, each one a nail in the coffin of a version of my life that didn't exist anymore. "I can get you more," Dean said eventually. "If you want." "No," I said quietly, folding the envelope. "This is enough." I didn't go home right away. I closed the shop, climbed into my truck, and drove. Not with any destination in mind. Just movement. Just space. The kind of distance you need when your body feels like it can't contain what's happening inside it. I ended up in a parking lot outside a diner 20 miles from town, sitting in the cab with the heater on low, gripping the wheel like it might stop my hands from shaking. The photos sat on the passenger seat beside me like a passenger I hadn't invited but couldn't get rid of. I kept going back to the look on her face in those pictures. The way she smiled at him. Unbothered, relaxed, natural. It wasn't the face of someone sneaking around. It was the face of someone comfortable, practiced. Like this wasn't new. Like she wasn't afraid of being caught because in her mind, she had already left me behind. That realization hurt more than anything else. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't a stupid night or a moment of weakness. It was deliberate. Coordinated. Sustained. She had built an entire routine around this man. While I was replacing brake pads and filling invoices, she was building a second life. The next morning, I watched her like a stranger. She made coffee, hummed under her breath, packed her tote bag with folders and a water bottle, the same way she always had. But now I saw everything differently. The time she spent adjusting her hair in the mirror wasn't casual. The phone tucked discreetly into her bag wasn't innocent. Every small detail was part of the deception, and now that I knew the truth, I couldn't unsee any of it. She kissed me on the cheek before heading out. I let her. I needed time. I needed to prepare. That day, I scanned everything from the file and backed it up to an external drive. I created a private folder on my desktop labeled tax docs and dropped the evidence in there. Photos, dates, receipts. I didn't know what the endgame was yet, but I knew it was coming. I wasn't going to confront her blind. That weekend, she said she had a staff strategy night. "We're doing team-building exercises," she told me, slipping on earrings as she stood in front of the mirror. Kind of a retreat vibe. Chad's leading most of it. My throat went dry. "Chad, huh?" She looked up. "Yeah, he's good at that kind of thing. Super organized." I nodded. "You two work together a lot." She paused. "Not really. He's more logistics side." "Why?" "No reason." She smiled and turned back to the mirror. "Don't wait up, okay?" And with that, she left. I stared at the door for a long time after it closed. My fists clenched, my jaw locked. But I didn't chase after her. Didn't rage or demand answers. Not yet, because the truth wasn't abstract anymore. It had a name, a face, a time, a location. It had receipts and lipstick and a leather jacket that didn't belong in my house. And now it had a consequence coming. A week passed after I got the photos. 7 days of tight-lipped routines and quiet avoidance. Alyssa went about life like nothing was wrong. Packing lunches, answering emails at the kitchen table, leaving her phone face down every time I walked into the room. Her lies wore a bright coat of normal. If you didn't know where to look, you'd think we were just two people living a quiet life. But I knew, and pretending I didn't was getting harder by the hour. Then came the awards night. She mentioned it casually over breakfast. "Oh, just a work thing Friday. Corporate recognition thing. Mandatory for department heads. But not a +1 event. Super boring." She stirred her coffee with one hand and scrolled through her phone with the other. No eye contact. That was her pattern now. Keep everything smooth. Don't leave room for questions. "Where's it being held?" I asked. "Downtown Hyatt. Ballroom C." She looked up for a second too long, like she realized she'd said too much. "Why?" "Just curious." She didn't answer, just smiled and changed the subject. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for another lie to be dropped like a coin at my feet. I was going to walk straight into it. Not to scream or start a scene, but to be undeniable. A mirror she couldn't look away from. But I wasn't going alone. Rachel was a name Alyssa had heard maybe once or twice, never with suspicion. We'd met at a G*N Rights charity event 6 months ago. She handled compliance law. Knew more about federal firearms policy than most politicians. Intelligent, direct, didn't play games. I had repaired a custom-built rifle for her father, and from there we started talking over coffee, occasionally dinner. Nothing romantic. Not then. But when I called her and asked if she'd come with me to a corporate event, she didn't ask questions. Just said, "What time?" Friday night arrived fast. I put on my best suit. Not the one I wore to weddings or the occasional funeral, but the sharp one I kept dry clean just in case I needed to remind someone I knew how to stand tall. Rachel arrived looking like elegance wrapped in steel. Clean lines, dark red lipstick, a calm intensity in her eyes that said she wouldn't be rattled. "You ready for this?" she asked as we parked across from the Hyatt. "No," I said, "but I'm doing it anyway." The ballroom was lit up like a gala. Crisp suits, floor-length gowns, crystal chandeliers reflecting light onto polished floors. A string quartet played near the entrance. Everything about the room screamed polish and power, the kind of event meant to signal control and success. Alyssa was near the front. I saw her before she saw me. She stood beside him. Chad. He was in a navy blue suit, tie loosened just slightly, drink in hand. His body leaned toward her in that casual, claimed way. She was laughing at something he said. Her hand brushed his arm. She wore emerald silk, smooth, floor-length, with a slit up the side. I'd never seen it before. She hadn't bought that dress for me. Her smile was radiant, her confidence electric. And then she turned, saw me. Her expression faltered, just for a beat. Her eyes locked with mine, and something in her changed. Like a switch flipped, the color drained from her face. The smile cracked, faltered, fell away entirely. She wasn't ready. She never thought I'd show. Especially not like this. Rachel stepped a half-pace closer beside me. Not possessive, just present. Calm. Unapologetic. I didn't wave. Didn't smile. Alyssa took a slow step backward. Her wine glass tipped slightly in her hand. Chad noticed. He looked from her to me and stiffened, like he knew instinctively who I was and why I was there. He didn't speak, just lowered his drink and took a subtle step away from her. The silence between us was louder than a punch to the face. I started walking forward, slow and measured. People turned as I passed, conversations dipping in volume as eyes followed our path. The air buzzed with curiosity and that awkward tension only a good scandal can stir. I stopped just 5 feet in front of her. "Hi, Alyssa," I said quietly. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "This your strategy team?" I asked, nodding toward Chad. "Nice suit. Looks familiar. Was he at the lake that week you worked from home?" Chad blinked and looked at Alyssa. She flinched. "I think I've seen you before," I said to him, tone still calm. "You like cabins?" He tried to recover. "Look, man, this isn't the time or—" "I think it's the perfect time," I said, just loud enough for people nearby to hear. "You're already here, dressed up, glass in hand. Might as well enjoy the recognition, right?" Alyssa stepped forward, tried to whisper. "Mark, please, not here." "Oh, so now it matters where we are?" I turned to Rachel. "He doesn't want me to embarrass him. He's worried about optics." Rachel tilted her head, eyes sharp. Should have thought about that before opening a second life under company resources. The word resources landed with weight. Alyssa froze. That was the moment her face changed. Forever. Not just fear. Not panic. Collapse. The realization that the lie was no longer contained. That it wasn't a private sin anymore. It was public. Visible. Witnessed. I didn't yell. I didn't demand an explanation. There was nothing she could say that hadn't already been answered in photos and bank statements and silent drives home from work. Instead, I leaned in closer and said, "Check your inbox when you get home." Then I walked away. Rachel and I exited through the ballroom doors without looking back. The silence behind us followed like a ghost. Outside, the air was cool. My hands were shaking, not with rage, but with adrenaline. Not because I had lost something, but because I had finally faced it, unmasked it. Rachel didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, as we reached the car, she looked at me and asked, "How do you feel?" "Strangely calm," I said, "like I just put the last nail in a box that needed closing." She nodded. "Good. Then you're ready for what comes next." And I was, because that night I didn't just watch Alyssa's face change. I watched mine change too. The morning after the awards night, the house was quiet. Not in the way it usually was on weekends, soft, still, full of late breakfast and casual silence, but empty, soulless. Alyssa hadn't come home the night before. I woke up on the couch, not because I passed out from exhaustion, but because I couldn't bring myself to sleep in our bed. I didn't want to touch the sheets she'd been lying on for months while building another life in parallel. I didn't want to smell her perfume in the pillowcases or see her hairbrush on the nightstand. So I stayed downstairs, upright, phone silent, laptop open, folder beside me. At 7:14 a.m., the front door opened. She stepped in slowly, heels in her hand, coat draped over her arm. makeup smudged from hours ago. For a split second, she looked like a teenager sneaking in past curfew. Then her eyes met mine, and that illusion shattered like glass on tile. I didn't speak. She closed the door quietly behind her, set her shoes by the wall, and walked to the kitchen like muscle memory pulled her there, like she thought she could slip back into routine. "I didn't know where else to go," she said softly. "I needed time. I didn't look up. So you stayed with him." She didn't deny it. "I'm not here to fight Mark," she said, her voice trembling. I know I messed everything up. I know you probably hate me right now, and honestly, I deserve it." I stood up and walked into the kitchen, handed her a manila folder. "Don't worry. I'm not interested in hate. I'm interested in clarity." She stared at it without opening it. "It's all in there," I said. "Dates, photos, copies of receipts, timeline of calls, Chad's involvement, yours, even your use of company transportation to reach the lake property, on what I'm sure were billable hours." Her mouth fell open slightly. You're going to report me?" "I already did," I said. "Yesterday morning." She leaned back against the counter like her knees might give out. "You didn't have to do that. You could have just ended things privately." I finally met her eyes. "You made this public, Alyssa. I just stopped pretending." She didn't reply, just lowered her gaze and slowly opened the folder. With every page she flipped, her shoulders sagged a little more. Her face, pale already, turned near gray. "I gave a copy to HR and your ethics compliance officer," I added. "And one more to Chad's wife. She's on your board, isn't she?" Her head *T up. "Yeah. I figured she deserved to see what her husband was doing with company resources. And with you." "Jesus, Mark," she whispered. "You've ruined." "No," I said, voice low but clear. "You ruined it. I just stopped cleaning up the mess for you." She looked like she might cry, but I wasn't moved by it anymore. Those tears weren't for me. They were for what she was about to lose. The image, the position, the illusion of control. She left that afternoon. No screaming, no final blow-up. She just packed a suitcase and slipped out the front door like a ghost abandoning a house it once haunted. Said she was staying with her sister for a while. I didn't ask which one. I didn't care. The silence after her departure was oddly peaceful. I didn't expect that. I thought I'd feel hollow or disoriented. Instead, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I could walk into my kitchen and not wonder what lie I was about to be told. I could sit at my table and not see someone carefully constructing a different life behind a curated smile. On Tuesday, I got a call from a mutual contact. Someone in her department who never picked sides but didn't hide truth either. "You were right," she said. "It all came out this morning. HR ran with the evidence. Legal got involved. They suspended her and started an ethics review. Chad's contract was terminated on the spot." "What about the board?" "She hasn't said a word. She's trying to stay composed. But, Mark, she's unraveling." A part of me thought I'd feel vindicated. I didn't. Not exactly. It wasn't satisfying watching her world collapse. It was just clarifying. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I just felt like I'd finally stopped losing. Over the next few days, she sent a few texts. Long ones. Paragraphs. "I never meant for this to go this far. I was unhappy and I didn't know how to say it. You didn't see me anymore. He did." I didn't respond to any of them, because I had seen her. I saw everything. I had noticed the changes, asked the questions, offered support. What I hadn't done was see through the lies early enough. That was on me. But her betrayal? That was entirely her own. Rachel checked in once, too. Just a text. "That was one hell of a night. You handled it with more control than most would have. Let me know if you need anything." I thanked her. I didn't push it beyond that. We weren't something yet. Maybe we wouldn't be. But she had been there when I needed strength, not sympathy. That mattered. Within a week, Alyssa's story started unraveling beyond the office. Word spread quietly like it always does in professional circles. Not shouted, but whispered. The woman who everyone thought had it together was now on leave. Chad's exit was blamed on a breach of conduct. Those who read between the lines filled in the blanks. A friend of mine in IT passed along one final note. They found encrypted messaging software on her work laptop, he said. Tried to hide it behind a dummy expense report app. She was talking to Chad through it. How long? 10 months. Maybe longer. That hit hard. 10 months of side conversations, secret meetings, false explanations, and stolen hours. 10 months of acting like nothing was wrong while laying bricks in a life without me. I started deleting old photos that week. Not in anger. Not as some dramatic purge. Just because I didn't want reminders of something that never really existed the way I thought it did. The wedding photo by the stairs came down first. Then the beach trip frame on my nightstand. The last thing I deleted was the note she left on our anniversary last year. Tucked into a lunch bag. Still choosing you every day. Love you endlessly. I read it once more, then tossed it in the trash. What people don't tell you about betrayal is that it doesn't come with thunder. It doesn't break down the door. It slides in, soft-footed, whispering, until you're not sure which part of your life was real and which part was curated for comfort. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake, and as I watched her career unravel, her connections dissolve, and her name quietly disappear from the LinkedIn titles she once wore like armor, I realized something else. Collapse doesn't always come with a crash. Sometimes it comes with a whisper. Sometimes it looks exactly like the consequences finally arriving, quiet, deliberate, and impossible to outrun. In the aftermath, my workshop became more than just a place to work. It was where I found peace. The hum of tools, the scent of oiled walnut stalks, and the sound of silence helped me feel whole again. Rachel began stopping by, at first curious, then simply present. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry. She just sat nearby, watched, and sometimes handed me tools without a word. She never treated me like someone broken. She saw me as a man rebuilding. Her presence wasn't loud or demanding. It was steady. I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to her. She already understood in ways I couldn't articulate. There was no pressure, no agenda, just quiet respect. I started looking forward to her visits more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't about filling a void. It was about sharing space with someone who didn't need to fix me. Just see me. A year later, my life looked nothing like it used to.